Well, yes, we are going to be talking about palliatives. Only recently, the federal government says it'd like to distribute 275 billion naira loan to manufacturers and micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises in the country. But the modus operandi of how it intends to do that has not been made clear to manufacturers. Only recently, it also said it was going to distribute 50,000 naira to nano businesses around the country, I think in all 774 local government areas. How is this going to work out? I mean, will this really be a boost for people's businesses? And how long since the president did say subsidy is gone and all of the conversations that has happened around it, what real palliatives have been given to the manufacturing sector? Well, we have this morning the Director General of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, Mr. Segun Ajayi-Kadir, and he joins us via Zoom. Good morning, Mr. Ajayi-Kadir. It's good to see you this morning. I do not know what the sector has been like. I know it's been pretty tough. We've been receiving news of how many more companies are closing down in the country, big companies, and we're looking at, it will look like job losses again, but this bleeding, I don't want to say this gloomy picture that we're seeing. Is there any hope on the horizon in terms of what the federal government is currently putting in place for businesses, especially in the manufacturing sector?
Okay, well, good morning. I guess you wanted me to respond, but I didn't hear what you were saying. It was muffled. So I couldn't get the questions you are asking. I couldn't get you very well.
Oh dear, I hope you can hear me now. Can you hear me?
No, unfortunately, no. I cannot hear you.
Oh dear. Okay, so we'll try this again. I'm going to have to see if my colleagues in Lagos, if they speak, maybe you can hear them better. So maybe my colleagues in Lagos should start with the very first question to you. Kayode and Bukola, over to you.
All right, thank you, Mark. Mr. Ajayi-Kadir, her question is quite simple. She was talking about the plan of the federal government to give out loans, palliatives, what have you, to nano businesses and other categories of businesses. And she's asking, particularly for the manufacturing sector, how are you receiving this? Is this something that is likely to improve your lot, as it were, and by extension, the lot of the sector in Nigeria? But generally, how are you receiving this particular plan?
Okay, thank you very much for having me. I think there's a bit of absence of clarity surrounding this, well, some prefer to call it palliative, but I think it's maybe loan facility to manufacturers. On one hand, there is this 75 billion to 75 companies, minimum of 75 companies. Then there's this 75 billion to nano, small, and medium-scale industries. And I think from what you have asked, I believe you are talking about this, the latter. That is the 75 billion to nano, small, and medium-scale industries. From what the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment said, this is going to be disbursed in collaboration between the ministry, SMIDAN, and working in concert with states, local governments, lawmakers, and so on and so forth. Now, what this suggests to me is that it is going to follow a pattern that is more like empowering people at the grassroots. And if you are going to give 50,000 to businesses, it means they are really, really small. And I think the government objective in that regard is to reduce poverty and reach small businesses that operate at the very, very low levels of the manufacturing value chain, if I may use the word. So to that extent, I think that is positive for them, because there are businesses that operate in that segment that is a huge challenge for them to get as low as 50,000. And so government will do well. And government, primarily the actors are politicians who must have made promises during the campaign and who will have been able to feel the pulse of those who operate in that segment. And I believe this is a response to maybe the promises that have been made. But if we are to talk about the first one, and I think that is where we are majorly concerned, is that it needed to be also situated within the context of what the lack of credit has been to manufacturers. As you are aware, and we have had these conversations before, one of the major issues that manufacturers have is access to credit. The prevailing lending rate now for the average manufacturer is somewhere between 24 to 28%. And there is no manufacturing business you can do with that kind of credit facility that you'll be able to produce, make profit, and sell well. So I believe this intervention, 75 billion for minimum of 75 companies, is a step in the right direction in that it appreciates the challenge that prevails in that segment. But I must tell you, it's like a drop in the ocean. But I think why we commend government for this initiative is because it demonstrates an appreciation of the challenge that we have, and also justifies the arguments we have raised concerning government opening special windows to give credit to manufacturers, rather than us having to go to the commercial banks that have to charge rates that will certainly make us uncompetitive and not make us profitable. So I believe that if government succeeds with this one, it's likely to open more doors for other facilities.
So we know for that the grants, loans, palliatives for the nano businesses, I think application is open already. People can go on a certain website and apply for that one, which is for nano. But as you said, we have fairly bigger businesses, particularly manufacturers, the micro, small, medium enterprises, and then of course the big ones who of course are focused on the 75 billion naira. And this announcement was made by the president in July, and the time frame that the president gave was that this government will support manufacturers with 75 billion naira between July and March next year. We know where the one with the nano businesses are, at least to a certain extent. They've opened applications, but where is the government, particularly in interfacing with you and giving out the funds with manufacturers? Where is the government right now with that? Has there been any activity whatsoever in that regard? If there has been, how much, if you're aware of that?
Okay, to the best of my knowledge, the government appears to still be consulting, and the time frame for startup is still up till March, like you rightly said. And yes, we have been consulted, and the advice we have given is that for everything that has to do with government money, you have to be accountable, you have to be sure-footed, you need to ensure that it's money well spent. Because this is taxpayers' money. And so the advice that we have given is that we needed to understand exactly what government was going to achieve by giving the credit. Are you going to promote backward integration with it? That is those companies that are backward integrating to sourcing of their raw materials. Are you trying to promote export-oriented companies? Are you trying to encourage those who have high potentials for employment? Are you trying to promote those who are likely to scale, or those who have imminent or present challenges about sourcing credit? So that will help you to narrow down on your strategy as to how you are going to disburse the funds. Because, we know how easy it is to be derailed in this regard when it comes to money, particularly now that we have a new administration and so many people will be jostling to have a share of the cake. But our government needed to be focused. Government needed to clearly define what it is so that we'll be able to identify deserving industries, and government will be able to monitor and evaluate the successes that have been achieved. Our interest, like I've said, is not in the fact that it is adequate. It is grossly inadequate. But we see it as a step in the right direction, and that it will give government a clear idea. If, for instance, government succeeds with this, it is going to encourage government to expand the envelope, if I may use the word, and to use the institution that is going to be, we have suggested BOI because they have a track record of success in those regards. It will help them to clearly identify which process is best if they succeed with one. And then they could think of recapitalizing BOI, they could think of opening a special purpose vehicle, allocating more funds, and so on and so forth. So we have been consulted. In summary, we've been consulted. We have offered advice as to what direction we think it should go. And we have said that we stand ready to be able to cooperate with government because we have the adequate record of more than 2,500 members. We know where they are located in Nigeria. We know what sector they belong to. We know what the challenges are. And we'll be able to cooperate with government to even ensure that it's government money and it's paid back because there is it's a loan, not a grant. And it's coming at single digit, even though we feel it should be lower than 9%.
Well, clearly, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in that regard, because we know that time is of the essence. And when I mean work should be done, it should be done as a matter of urgency, really, because we can see that manufacturers are bleeding. The front pages tell that story. But you raised some very important issues. What is the government trying to achieve? Backward integration? Are they trying to improve export, focus on export-oriented businesses? Is it for employment, likely to scale? Some will even say, is it for social enterprises as well? You know, businesses that are not just focused on profit alone, but they have a social impact attached to them. If the government will make a big impact, I mean, 2,500 manufacturers, 75 billion naira. Again, we don't know how that will work, if it will just be across the value chains or the lump sum will be given to 75 major manufacturers. What would you advise the government to then focus on if this would be impactful and effective?
Okay, thank you. I think this is a very important question, and we had not specifically indicated to government which sector because we want to be sure of where government wants to go. Because whichever way they go amongst those we have suggested, we will be able to support. But if you ask me, I think it will be good for us to focus on those ones who have high capacity to generate jobs. And you'll be looking at sectors that also ties into alleviating poverty and making food available to the people, which will see the value chain in the food and beverage sector. And that kind of money will be able to impact. If you go to heavy industries, 75 billion to one company may not even be adequate. But in the food and beverage value chain, yes, you'll be able to have some impact in that regard. Also, you could also think of those who concurrently have capacity for export. Because as you will have seen, the average disposable income of Nigerians is dwindling. We are entering into the AFCFTA proper. We are part of the pilot scheme. And there's a huge opportunity for even small and medium scale industries to be able to trade across the border. So I think if government focuses on these two areas, it will be helpful. And the impact will be immediate and government will be able to see. Like I said, I cannot discuss this matter without indicating that the amount is not adequate. We appreciate the government for doing this. It demonstrates an appreciation of the challenge. And we believe that it should be a test case for government to be able to scale and be able to address the issue of credit. Not that is the most critical challenge that we have, but it's part of it. And it will demonstrate government's readiness to improve that sector.
Interesting, Mr. Kadri. Some of the things that you have said suggest to me that the questions you're asking about, the direction of government, be it backward integration, the processing of raw materials at home, and all of that, have not been answered by government, and as well, your demand for the interest rates to be lower than 9%. You can confirm to us if there has been an engagement where all of these concerns are raised and if government has addressed them. And, more importantly, if government has not addressed them, how can these loans be disbursed between now and March? You know that the initial deadline or time frame for the disbursement of the loans was between July, when it was announced, and March 2024.
Well, I think it took some time for ministers to be appointed, to settle down, and there has been quite a lot of movement. Mr. President preoccupied with getting foreign direct investment, which is excellent, but we always say that you also have to think about those that are existing in the country, because we will actually be the ones to, the best advertisement you can have is a satisfied customer. So, they should talk to us, they should deal with our challenges. So there has been a lot of busy schedule for government. So I think the process of consultations has been a bit delayed. The conversation is on. Yes, we've not had any closure as to whether there will be reduction in the rate from 9%. We have suggested 5% because, quite frankly, if you give any manufacturer any loan facility and you are charging more than 5%, you are not helpful. But single digits is still better than 25 to 26 to 27%. So those issues have not been answered. I believe and I hope that the urgency we have asked for will be adduced, and that before March we'll be able to, get some traction on it, because we know our members, we know where they are located, we know who the MDs are, we know what challenges they have, and in the question of a week or a month, we'll supply all the information that is needed to support the process. And like I said, we have indicated that we are ready. We are a bit concerned that the process is slow, but our government has to act with a lot of caution, and we are only hoping that more urgency will be brought to bear. And like I said, that this will be a test case so that during the course of the year, we can see much more money allocated in that regard.
Now, more on engagement, Mr. Kadri. The Presidential Committee on Tax Reform appears to have submitted the first part of its work. To what extent were manufacturers engaged on this? Because I've heard you say consistently in the past that the real issue is the multiplicity of taxes. So to what extent were you engaged, and what's the promise of the reduction in these number of taxes on the businesses of indigenous manufacturers in the country?
Yes, if you ask me, one of the best decisions that I believe has been taken by this administration is setting up that Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform. And man represents the organized private sector of Nigeria. I actually serve on that committee, and we have received every cooperation. We have participated in virtually all the engagements, and we are very happy with the low-hanging fruits, we called it, that has been submitted to Mr. President. While Mr. President was receiving the report from our chairman, our able chairman, I must say, he promised that he was going to implement. And I was very pleased to hear from the chairman of FRS that government is putting in place measures to ensure effective implementation of the recommendations. I believe that government is on the right track, that if President Tinubu would implement those recommendations that we have made, I think I will be a very proud Nigerian to say that we will have one of the best tax policies any country in Africa has ever had. Because we are going to tax the fruits and not the seed. We are not going to tax poverty. We are going to bring accountability to the system. There will be the use of technology which will remove human interface that is breeding ground for corruption and inefficiency in the system. We are going to drastically reduce the cost of collection, and we are going to ensure that taxes collected go to government coffers. So we are actively involved, we are consulted, and we are very happy with the way it is going. Some of my friends, because we actually have very strenuous engagements on this, we hold meetings at night, finish midnight. And when I talk to some of my friends, they say, we hope that President Tinubu will have the political will to be able to implement this. I believe he does. I pray he does. And I believe that Nigerian business environment will be the better for it.
Beyond your hopefulness about the political will of the president, I was hoping that you were going to give us specifics about those recommendations, the reduction of 60 different taxes, that manufacturers have to endure. What's the specific promise of reduction?
Okay, we are going to bring it to less than 10. Because all the 60 you mentioned, I don't think up to half of it really goes into government coffers that can be accounted for. And I believe it's in the public space. The MDAs, for instance, will be able to focus on their jobs of delivering service and not tax collectors or revenue agents, because they don't have the capacity to do so. So there are quite a number of them. And then we are going to seek the collaboration of all these, of all the states. So subnationals are going to be involved, and there are going to be legislations that has to be made to give effect to those recommendations that have been made. Those are very important recommendations that we believe that government should be able to implement very easily if we have all stakeholders. And I could see the chairman of FRS, he was appealing to the lawmakers that they should please give him support to be able to achieve it. All the MDAs also will need to come in to give support so that we can be smoothly implemented. Some of these practices that the recommendations seek to remove have been on for more than 40 years. We have laws that were made in 1939, 1940 that we have had to confront. So I think that if the president implements those recommendations, it will be very good for the economy. We have also spoken about harmony between fiscal and monetary policies, which we all agree has been counterproductive, the lack of synergy between them. So there are quite a number of recommendations that are made, and they are also in the public domain. I believe we have been very transparent, and even now we are still consulting with different segments of the society, in the villages, everywhere, for Nigerians to be able to have a say. Our chairman have said that we will reach every Nigerian that has something to say to ensure that they are able to say it. I hope I'm not sounding like a government worker, but I'm very passionate about the success of this committee.
Well, you're forgiven even if you did, but there seems to be a lot of promise there, from 60 to 10, which appears to, promise to bring relief to manufacturers and indeed small businesses. And I imagine that my colleague Malpe has a lot more questions for you in that regard. Malpe.
Well, thank you, Bukola. First and foremost, I'd like to, hear your take, because I also missed a little part of your initial intervention on the matter. So I'm not certain if my colleagues have taken you up on this issue of Procter & Gamble leaving Nigeria. They were doing a small part. I think they had closed largely some of their operations here in Nigeria, but we now hear that they're finally closing ground operations in Nigeria. First, how did this news hit you? And also the fact that, well, let's take that first. How did you receive the news?
My dear sister, unfortunately, I'm still not able to hear you. I can see that you are talking, but it's muffled and I can't decipher what you are saying, unfortunately. I cannot hear you. I can't what you are saying.
So I'm not certain if my colleagues in Lagos can hear me. If they can, it would be very helpful if they can.
Not to worry, Malpe, carried it to the rescue again. Well, the question for Malpe is about the P&G. the recent news, they had been operating minimally at some point, but now we understand that they're moving to an import-based model now. And she's asking, how did you receive that first?
Well, obviously we received sadness, but it is not totally unexpected, and more may happen. Because there is no doubt that we operate in an environment that is challenged. We have always said it, and I think our channels, you have been very helpful in putting forward the measures. Manufacturing in any economy is a strategic choice. The government has to make up its mind whether it wants its country to be an industrialized one. And once you take that decision, you have to do all that is needed to remove the binding constraint that limits the performance of that sector. Nigeria has not done so, and that's why you can see that there are closures. I think it is news because it is P&G, it is news because it is GlaxoSmithKline, it is news because they've been in the country for a very long time. But there are several others that have died quietly, and for reasons that are clearly avoidable. But I think there's a strong lesson to be learned here, which is the fact that the big ones that are exiting are those multinationals. And I think this should send a clear signal to government that, regrettable as it is, it should guide future action. We need to be strategic in what we promote. So what this means is that if you have a challenged local manufacturer, he's not likely to go anywhere. As a matter of fact, he doesn't have anywhere to go to. That is why we are saying that foreign direct investment is excellent. It has led to phenomenal improvement in the performance of manufacturing sectors of so many economies. But it should come secondary to empowering the local investor, the existing manufacturers, because that is what is enduring. That is what can allow you to scale. That is where you have certainty that come rain, come shine, as they say, is going to be here with you. So it is regrettable, to answer your question directly, and it's not totally unexpected. And I think except we take clearly defined measures, many more will happen. As you can see, quite a number of issues are due. The lack of they couldn't repatriate their forex. They also had challenge with multiplicity of taxes. We have been part of the conversation as to what the challenges are, and it's not different from how others are challenged.
Oh dear. So when you say that more are still coming, a lot of people thought we had seen the worst. How can we reverse this? Because looking at the front page of The Guardian says, 15 companies have had to close down in the past 3 years. You say that it doesn't even maybe capture the full picture. So when you say more are still coming, are you saying more multinationals? Are you saying more local manufacturers are still going to close down, shut businesses? And as you said, those ones don't have where to go to. So what exactly do you mean by more are still coming? Is there any stopping it as well?
Yes, there is, if the current situation does not improve, certainly we'll have more closures. It's business. You are in business to make profit. And once the environment is not conducive for you to recover your costs and make profit, you close shop. Because you must have borrowed money, you must have put your own money, you must have engaged talents who work with you that you have obligation to pay. So once all these are not adding up, you simply close shop. And it's not difficult. And I don't think I'm making any statement that should not be expected, that you can't keep on doing the same thing and expecting a different result. If the challenges that we have identified, I think about 4 days ago, a member called to say that the duty, he was paying duty on his raw materials at 500 million naira. And that by the adjustment of the calculation of his import duty, it has jumped to 700 million. Now, how are you going to pass on this 200 million to the end user? Meanwhile, his disposable income has continued to dwindle. So if this is a multinational or it's a local company, certainly it's going to reduce its capacity utilization, it's going to downsize, because it's going to produce less and make less profit. It's not going to be competitive. And foreign similar products that come from outside the country where it's a low cost will beat him in the marketplace. So that is how companies die. There's no magic. So there are quite a number of issues. Thankfully, multiplicity of taxes may be a thing of the past soon, but you also see electricity. The cost of diesel has continued to rise, which is the alternative. And you can imagine how it's going to impact on the system. There's also the scarcity of forex to import raw materials that are not locally available. That is needed for productivity. If that is not there, it's hardship for existing manufacturers. And what is going to happen to their business, your guess is as good as mine. There's insecurity that has truncated the value chains, the supply of our raw materials, those ones that we are able to source here. It needs to be addressed. If it is not addressed, the implications very clear that it's going to happen. I think we have said it, and we hopefully, very soon we're looking forward to having a conversation. Nigeria needs to have a conversation between manufacturers and government. We have asked for it severally, for us to decide whether we want this country to manufacture or not. Because there are certain things that countries that are surviving, that have become manufacturing hubs, there are certain things they do that we are not doing. And except we start to do it, we won't make any headway. We won't make any headway. And we cannot say this more than enough. We are having engagement with government. We are hopeful that we move from talk to action, and that we do the things that are needed for you to be able to have a vibrant manufacturing sector. Africa should have been ours for taking. The AFCFTA has offered an excellent opportunity for us to rule Africa in terms of market access and so on. But if we are not competitive, if we do not take deliberate measures to remove all these binding constraints that we have spoken about, and is beginning to sound like a broken record, we will not take the advantage. And it will be very unpleasant for Nigeria that has so much potential and has the capacity, the human capacity, the natural resources, and even the respect and the image to be able to deliver.
Mr. Kadri, I've been turning over in my mind the figure you put out, 500 million naira paid on import duty alone. Then how much would be the cost of the raw material that your colleague is importing? That's a huge one. And I was going to ask, with the exit of these foreign manufacturers, what the potential is, for manufacturing opportunities for indigenous manufacturers. But I reckon that you have answered pretty much a lot of the questions, in your last commentary. But then again, it throws up a lot of questions. If Procter & Gamble is now adopting the import model and taking jobs, with them, how can local manufacturers be protected? And then again, what's the, it leaves a big question mark on government's ease of doing business policy. So has it been well thought out if these manufacturers, foreign manufacturers, are exiting the scene?
Well, I think I would like to start from the last one. And we worked very well with the government, the special advisor who was in charge of ease of doing business. And what we have said is that ease of doing business is different from cost of doing business. If it's easier for you to register companies and it's easier for you to put in processes that make it more efficient, only for the company to die after 1, 2, 3 years of operation, because cost will simply kill the company. So we have been moving up the rating in terms of ease of doing business, but we have not done well with the cost of doing business. And I think that is key. At the end of the day, every talk about manufacturing is what is going to happen in the marketplace. If you produce and you don't sell, you are going to invest on hiring warehouses where you keep those manufactured items. And if you are not careful, because we always have expiry date, it will expire and you have to pay for disposal of those items. That's how, that's how simple it can get. So we have not done well in this. And what can be done to protect local industries? There are conventional measures that are taken. That is for, one of it is ensuring that the imports do not come in at rates that will allow them to compete unfavorably with the locally manufactured ones. So that's the use of duty. There is also the idea of incentivizing local manufacturers so that you are able to bring their cost lower than, and then be able to allow them to operate. But the critical issue here is that there are agreements that Nigeria has signed, for instance, like the AFCFTA, which is going to reduce duty of more than 90% of all the items imported to less than 10%. And so there's a limit to which you can use higher duties to constrain or to constrain importation. Right. You specifically mentioned that P&G is going to resort to the import, and that is where the problem is, which right. means that they are going to be able to import from economies that have low cost. It then means more trouble for local indigenous manufacturers who are producing similar products. And that's what we are saying. When you allow imports, when import is prioritized, you create jobs outside and unemployment inside. So let's say there's an avalanche of imports of those materials. It's just simply going to subsume the ones that are produced locally. And I think it is more worry for jobs. So we don't have only lost the ones for P&G. Then you should be preparing for the ones that will be heavily impacted by their imports. So okay. You can't run away from government has a responsibility to make the environment conducive for business. That is the bottom line.
And I think that's a great place to anchor, something to chew on. If we're asking who is next, we should also ask, what can we do to protect our manufacturers, our jobs, and our economy? But I'd like to thank you so much, Mr. Segun Ajayi-Kadir, for your time on the program. He's the DG of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. Thank you, and we wish you the very best.
Thank you so much for having me.
We'll take a moment now. When we return, recall the president saying good governance is a panacea for coups in the sub-region. How much of good governance are we having? How can we ensure we get better with this? That's our conversation next. Stay with us.